10 Typewriter Tales, a collection of stories, written by Thomas Fincham, narrated by John William Cantiz. Mr. Horrowitz's House. Snowflakes fluttered and fell, creating a white bed across the playground. Billy Callahan stared out the window. He longed to be outside, free of all that was happening inside the classroom. He felt a sharp pain behind his right ear. He turned. Kyle and Dermot, the pranksters of the 5th grade, were giggling uncontrollably. Kyle was holding an elastic band. Billy turned back to the window, ignoring them as usual. They're just jerks, he told himself. The bell rang. It was time for recess. Billy raced to the back of the classroom and hurriedly got dressed. Outside, he tucked his ears under his hat and wrapped a scarf around his neck. It was winter, and all the kids were excited about the snow. They were running and screaming, having snowball fights, making snowmen and snow angels. But Billy did none of that. He enjoyed just walking and watching the snowflakes come down. Suddenly, something skidded past his shoulder. It was Dermot and one of his snowballs. "Come on, Billy, play with us," he said. Billy turned away. Dermot reloaded and fired another snowball. This one hit Billy in the back of the head. He fell forward onto the ground. He felt like crying, but before he could, Dermot was standing above him. "I'm sorry, Billy," he said. He was sorry, but not because Billy was hurt. It was because he might get in trouble. "I was only joking with you. I didn't mean to hurt you." He helped Billy up. Kyle came over. He was also holding a snowball. "We're just playing with you, Billy. Don't tell Miss Potts." Billy wiped the snow off his coat and said, "I'm not going to tell her." Kyle and Dermot were relieved. The bell rang. The rest of the morning, Kyle and Dermot behaved themselves. They didn't bother Billy once. In fact, they even tried to be nice to him. At lunchtime, Billy ran home. He lived only 3 blocks away. He banged on the door and his mom let him in. He ran up to the 2nd floor and washed his hands. When he came out, his parents' bedroom door was ajar, and he saw his father standing by the dresser. His father was a police officer, and during his beat, he would make time to have lunch with him. He removed his gun and placed it inside a drawer. He never wore his gun in the house. Hot mashed potatoes with corn and a piece of chicken lay on the table as Billy came into the kitchen. He grabbed a bottle of ketchup and covered the entire plate with it. He considered ketchup part of the meal. His younger sister, who was not yet old enough to go to school, began bombarding him with questions. She was so eager to start school herself. After finishing lunch, he was out the door. He wanted to walk around. He loved the freedom to move and explore. Back in class, the teacher gave her pupils a spelling test. Billy was a spelling whiz. He would break the words into pieces depending on the sound and spell them. The teacher always gave him a scratch and sniff sticker for getting a perfect score on the test. The second recess came, and Billy was outside again. "Teacher's pet," Kyle yelled. He began making obscene noises. Dermot came over and began singing, "Billy and Miss Potts, sittin' in a tree." "Stop it," Billy shot back. "Why, you gonna marry her?" Kyle and Dermot laughed. "Stop it," Billy shouted. "Why are you so mean to me?" "Because you're a wimp," Dermot said. "Am not," Billy answered. "Are too." "Are not?" "Then prove it," Kyle said. Kyle and Dermot huddled together and began whispering. "Do you know Mr. Horrowitz's house?" Kyle asked. Billy cringed at the name. Every kid knew about Mr. Horrowitz and his house. Mr. Horrowitz was the most feared man in the neighborhood. He lived alone in an old house on top of a hill. Giant trees and bushes surrounded the place, which meant you had to pass through a forest to get to his house. Mr. Horrowitz also hated children, and there were many rumors about it. There was one about a boy who tried to sneak into Mr. Horrowitz's house, but got lost in the forest and never came out. At night, if you passed the house, you could hear the boy's cries for help. "You have to go to Mr. Horrowitz's house," Kyle said, "and bring back a troll." Every kid knew Mr. Horrowitz collected miniature ceramic trolls, which he displayed outside his house. He probably had 50 or 60 of them. "Bring back one," Dermot said. "No way," Billy said, sounding a little afraid. "I'm not doing it." "Then you're a big chicken," Kyle said, imitating a chicken. "Stop it," Billy protested. "If you do it, then we promise that we'll never tease you again." Kyle and Dermot both placed their right hands on their hearts. Billy thought about it for a moment. He really wanted to be left alone. It would be great to not have Kyle and Dermot bugging him. Plus, he had heard from his parents that Mr. Horrowitz was out of town visiting a relative. "Okay, I'll do it." "When?" Billy finally said. "Tonight," Dermot answered. Billy gasped. "In the dark?" "Yep," Kyle said. "Why? You scared?" "I'll do it," Billy replied, mustering up confidence. "But you promise not to bother me the whole year." "Yeah, of course," Kyle and Dermot snickered. For the remainder of class, Billy couldn't concentrate. He was terrified. He couldn't stop thinking about Mr. Horowitz's house. It didn't help that Kyle and Dermot kept reminding him. When school ended, Billy ran home. He went straight upstairs and locked himself in his room. He came out only when his mom called him for supper. "What's wrong, honey?" his mom asked when they were at the kitchen table. He shook his head. "You haven't touched your plate. Something happened at school?" He shook his head again, but he quickly picked up a fork and began eating his meal. He didn't want his mom asking any more questions. "I'm gonna go out with the guys tonight," his father said to his mother. "I might be a little late." "Okay, dear," she said, clearing up the table. Later in the evening, Billy came down from his room. His father had already left, and his mother was busy on the telephone. "I'm going to Jason's house," he said as he made his way to the door. "Did you do your homework?" his mom asked, covering the phone receiver. "Yeah, Mom. Bye." He was out the door. On the front porch, he stood still. The cold wind pierced his cheeks. It was dark and freezing. He was more scared than ever. He went around the garage and came out with his bicycle. With the slippery snow, it was difficult to maintain balance, but Billy did his best. He slowly and carefully made his way to Mr. Horowitz's house. At the front entrance, he stopped. The path leading to the house was dark and scary. Thinking about the lost boy sent a chill up his spine. He started getting goosebumps. He looked around and saw the street was quiet except for the howl of the winter wind. He tightened his grip on the bicycle and rode straight into the small forest. He kept his eyes focused on the path ahead, avoiding looking at the trees and bushes on either side. He maneuvered around the branches that were sticking out and made his way to the house. The house looked more like a cabin. It was small and made of logs. Billy dropped his bicycle and ran up the steps to the front porch. He grabbed the troll beside the front door and turned. Standing at the bottom of the steps was a ghostly figure. Billy froze. The ghostly figure shrieked and lurched at Billy. Billy screamed and pulled out his father's gun. He fired. The next second, Billy was on his bicycle, racing back through the dark path. His heart was pounding, and he felt as if he might lose control of the bicycle. Out of nowhere, a branch caught one of his wheels. He somersaulted to the ground. His knees were scratched and bruised. Tears began to water his eyes, but Billy immediately got on the bicycle and rode out of Mr. Horowitz's property. 10 feet from the house, peeking from behind a bush, Kyle saw everything. He came out from his hiding place and approached the front porch. On the bottom steps, draped in white but covered in blood, lay the body of his best friend, Dermot. He was dead. Kyle fell to his knees and began crying because his prank had gone horribly wrong. Billy was sweating profusely as he made his way home. He dumped his bicycle in the garage and raced up to his front door. "You're back early?" his mom said as he went by her to the second floor. He locked himself in his room and huddled in the corner. He was scared, shivering uncontrollably. He felt as if the ghostly figure would appear out of nowhere and hurt him. Frightened, Billy began crying. He stopped a little later and felt much better. He was no longer scared. The ghostly figure had not followed him home. He wiped his eyes. He was safe now. The telephone rang downstairs, and his mom answered. She screamed. "Billy!" she yelled. "Come downstairs." Billy Callahan was scared again. This has been 10 Typewriter Tales, a collection of stories. Written by Thomas Fincham. Narrated by John William Cantees. Copyright 2021 by Thomas Fincham. Production copyright by Thomas Fincham.